Hello.
Our story begins inside the Chancellor's office. Anakin Skywalker just moved across the city in a blur. He was here to save the one man who would gift him everything he ever wanted, to save the ones he cared about. Anakin was extremely hopeful that it wasn't too late. He sped into the room only to see the Chancellor lying against the edge of the windowsill. It was a miracle no one had heard any of the commotion inside of the room. Skywalker slowed his movement as he closed in on the Jedi Master of the Order. Mace turned over and subtly raised his hand, as if he was telling Anakin to stop. Anakin did stop. He looked over as Palpatine told him that he told Anakin that it would come to this. The Jedi were taking over. Anakin looked back to Mace, who told Sidious that the oppression of the Sith was over. He had lost. Palpatine couldn't stand this and quickly shot lightning towards Mace Windu. The Jedi Master blocked it. The fury and anger rising from the dark lord of the Sith was blinding. Anakin moved back, throwing his hand over his face to block the lightning. He could hear Mace holding his own, and Sidious crying out in vain. It was like grabbing an electrical wire. Once it started, he couldn't stop it. But Sidious was alright with that. He wanted to put on a show, one that would help him pull Skywalker to the dark side of the Force. But all of this only confirmed what Anakin feared the most. Sidious was the Dark Lord of the Sith, the one who orchestrated the Clone Wars. Sure, Palpatine said so earlier, but the visual representation of lightning charged a memory for Anakin. There were numerous occasions in which Padme was put into danger because of Palpatine, and even more danger because of Sidious. It started with the invasion of Naboo, the bombing on the landing platform before the Battle of Geonosis, the time he sent her to the coordinates of the Malevolence. Honestly, Anakin admitted he should have seen this coming earlier. But now, he could see Sidious for who he really was. He couldn't have let the oppression of the Sith last anymore. Anakin looked back down to see Sidious's face torn and ravaged by the dark side. Mace pulled his lightsaber back around and pointed it towards the Sith Lord. He was going to end this, and Anakin almost told him to wait. But then something clicked. Anakin was going to say it wasn't the Jedi way, that perhaps Palpatine should stand trial. Mace could sense a confusion building within Skywalker. It's exactly why he didn't want him here. It wasn't selfish, it was in protection of one of the most unpredictable Jedi in the Order. Anakin realized at the end of all of it, Sidious wanted Anakin to be the new Sith apprentice. He didn't care about Padme. When Anakin thought that Palpatine must stand trial, it was the same thing as it was with Dooku. If Anakin could get away with one execution, so could Mace Windu. These were the two most evil beings in the galaxy. Anakin ignited his lightsaber, and Sidious smiled. Mace was surprised, but Anakin was focused on Sidious. He told the Master of the Order that they should kill him. Without missing a beat, both lightsabers were driven forward into Sidious, killing him instantly. The two Jedi stopped. Mace turned over to Anakin and then back to the Sith Lord. There wasn't a word to be said. They were just silent. Mace felt a bit ashamed about the whole situation, and he informed Anakin that he didn't want him to bear that burden. Skywalker turned to him and confessed that he already felt it, considering he was ordered by Palpatine to execute Dooku on the Invisible Hand. This, in a way that neither of them could have predicted, helped them cement their own bond with each other. Their lightsabers reignited, and the silence that followed was one of serenity. Mace looked over at Skywalker and put his hand on his shoulder and smiled, telling the young Jedi that he had done it. Anakin was confused. But Mace elaborated that upon their return to the Jedi Temple, he'd be made a Jedi Master. The Council knew this assignment would be difficult for him, but it would prove whether or not he was worthy of the title of Master. He had just proven that he was. Anakin was surprised. The emotions that went through him were certainly layered in confusion, but he couldn't help but be appreciative. It was a huge deal for him. Becoming a Jedi Master was something he always wanted, and now he was. Mace looked over Anakin's shoulder and told him that he must go. Mace would handle the situation. It had gotten ugly, and he didn't want Skywalker taking any of the flack for it. He helped bring balance to the Force. That is all the Order could have asked of him, though things wouldn't go so easily. Before Skywalker could leave, Commander Fox made his way into the Chancellor's office. Palpatine was about to execute Order 66, but the Jedi showed up before he could. Fox was en route before the Jedi got there, so he was just coming from the other side of the city. When he and his Coruscant guard arrived, they found Mace and Anakin moving the Jedi bodies into the main room and awaiting the arrival of the temple guards. Every single deceased corpse would be taken back to the temple. The Jedi would get proper burials, and the Sith Lord be cleansed and then burned ceremonially, just to ensure he could find peace and purity as he became one with the Force. That would never come though. Fox didn't ask questions. Instead, he resorted to violence, immediately firing on the Jedi. Anakin and Mace quickly defended themselves. The clones started to drop, and so Fox took cover. The Jedi weren't aiming to harm the clones, they were just defending themselves. Neither Mace nor Anakin wanted to hurt these troopers. They were just misinterpreting an event. It wouldn't matter. As temple guards arrived, chaos ensued. Instead of it looking like Jedi here to help the situation, it looked like reinforcements. Anakin and Mace had no issue holding their own. They were the best of the best warriors inside the Jedi Order. The two of them were unstoppable forces of nature, but more clones kept on coming. Mace and Anakin had knocked many of the clones back, all of them being injured but not deadly enough to kill them. Mace knew it wouldn't stop, so the reinforcements came around the side of the building, and the two Jedi exited. The vessel then retreated back to the temple. Skywalker asked what would happen now, and Mace told him that he would get Mace Windu on the comms. They could resolve everything. But the issue is, Mace Windu wasn't an ally of the Jedi. He was Sidious' ally, and he was banking on Sidious so that he could secure his place in the new Empire. Their call lasted for about 20 seconds, and in that time, Mace expressed that the Jedi would face extinction at the hands of their very own army. The message was ominous but kind of obvious. Anakin heard it and asked what it meant. Mace told the young Jedi Master that they would have to prepare the temple defenses. He told Anakin that once they got to the temple, he needed him to inform Sindralik to raise the temple defenses. They couldn't allow anything in. Anakin asked what he was going to do, and Mace said that he'd protect the Jedi Order. After all, as Master of the Order, it was his responsibility. Above all else, he was to defend every single Jedi inside of their order. They landed quickly and split off. A number of temple guards had been killed inside the executive building, not to mention the 3 council members. It would already look bad, and Mace was changing the game. Quickly, Mace sent out orders to every Jedi around the galaxy, giving them coordinates to go to and instructions. It was one of many temples across the galaxy. This particular one was on Simya. It was in the Outer Rim territories, which was close enough for most of the Jedi to get to, with little to no issues. It was an out-of-the-way one, and it would be safe. Because Mace Windu was calling the shots, he only thought about taking out the Jedi Order on Coruscant, so when he initiated Order 66, he forgot all about the countless commanders around the galaxy, though the Coruscant Guard and 501st would be a lot to deal with for any grouping of people. But this was a Jedi temple, one that had survived generations, one that had seen Coruscant grow for millennia. They'd be alright. Sindralik, the Jedi Order's battle master, had all the preparations ready. The Jedi Temple was a fortress, and it would survive anything short of an orbital bombardment. With Mace calling all the shots inside the temple, as Master of the Order, he knew that Mace, unlike Palpatine, would get impatient. So quickly, he had every available archivist empty out the restricted section. They had to prepare to escape Coruscant for Simya. It wasn't an easy call. Everyone had been raised here, and called the temple their home. But it wasn't safe anymore. The Republic had turned on them, and until they could actually make a stand against Mace, then they would have to remain silent. Hours would pass by, and eventually, just as Mace predicted, Mace would get impatient and send a number of Republic destroyers to wipe out the temple. This entire time, Masters and so forth were running and operating under a directive that only the Battle Master and a few selected Masters had. No one believed the situation would get to a point where they needed to evacuate, but they moved quickly. They went by classes and ranks. Caregivers, infants, instructors, and younglings went first. After them, Jedi Padawans, ages 10 to 17, would next leave. Following them would be Jedi Master and Padawan duos above the previous ages, going out with archivists, priests, and temple guards. The last ones out of the temple were the Jedi Masters on the High Council and the Battle Master himself. No one on the outside knew where the Jedi had gone, but they vanished out under the temple and into the city. There were numerous vessels hidden across the city that were used to take the Jedi off to Simya. The actions of Mace and Anakin were perfect, and they saved every single Jedi in the moment. Some of the Jedi on various battlefronts had a hard time leaving their troops behind, but because the message came from the temple itself and Master Windu himself, they did as they were asked. Though this had Anakin quickly contacting Ahsoka and telling her to get as far away from Mandalore as she could. Being that she was in hyperspace, she would have to do that once they arrived over Coruscant. The reason he and the other Jedi were so worried was because, aside from Fox, the entire Grand Army of the Republic stationed on Coruscant became like cold-blooded killers. Anakin noticed this with his own men, and he realized they weren't acting like themselves. They were almost robotic in nature. The Jedi began a mass exodus to their hidden world across the galaxy. Simya was hidden through a space anomaly, and the only way to reach it was by trusting the Force. Jedi learned this as they ferried themselves across the galaxy, using Mace's message to guide them in. This would be a safe place of refuge, because just like Ahch-To, it was one of many Jedi worlds that were hidden from the galaxy. It was similar to Lyra-San and Lasan for the Lasat species, just a hidden world that could be utilized. Simya was a lush, tropical world. It would be a calm place for the Jedi to be. there was already a temple on the planet, and while the Jedi hadn't been here for millennia, the temple located within the brush was still fairly well kept. There weren't beings that did upkeep like the caregivers on Ahch-To, but the temple itself was constructed in harmony with the living beings on the planet, so insects and animals could find refuge within the building, but plants wouldn't destroy, only become one with. The temple was truthfully beautiful, and many Jedi were simply shocked that they had places like this across the galaxy. Though unlike places at Tempest, Ashes Ray, and Tython, this place still looked like it could still operate. The other locations had since decayed, much more drastically than the monastery here on Simya. What followed would be the death of Maul when he was handed over to Republic forces on Coruscant. Maul would be executed by the Order 66 infected clones, which completely blindsided Rex. At the same time, Mas Amedda would try and turn the Republic against the Jedi, but that wouldn't go as well as he hoped for. Not because the Senate didn't rally behind him, they did, but more so the fact that the Separatists saw blood in the water. Grievous was defeated on Utapau, Dooku was killed over Coruscant, and they lost a number of battles within the span of the last several hours. But there was one key factor in the rise of the Republic war effort that the Separatists were aware of. It was the Jedi. From a logical standpoint, as the war continued, the Jedi became better commanders and generals. From the Separatist perspective, not reality, the clones were decent soldiers, but they lacked the ability to fight without proper leadership from the Jedi, which is why after 2 years, the Republic started winning. It was clearly a wrong conspiracy theory, but it did have some validity to it. So now with the Jedi exiting the war effort, or being shunned away from the Republic by Mas Amedda, the CIS could potentially strike back, and their council was all for it. Not for nothing, they did have a large sum of reserves that Sidious had been keeping away from them. With no contact from Sidious and Dooku being dead, there was a chance that the Force users being removed from the battlefront could allow the CIS to actually find victory. Mas Amedda believed he played the system, but it fell back on him hard. The war was over and it was within his hands. Now he was becoming a chancellor with no true power, due to not being Palpatine, and he had to continue a war that was pretty much over, though he at least had the bragging rights to say that he turned the public against the Jedi. There was no question in that. The Republic vilified the Jedi and they would pay the price for doing so. On Simio, the Jedi were dealing with the Great Change. Due to the sheer size of this particular temple, it was easy for them to fit in, which is why Mace chose it. It was one of the older temples in the galaxy that could actually hold anything close to 10,000 Jedi. It was closer to around 8,000 large, but the Jedi were working their way into it. They also had plenty of vessels to use for sleeping arrangements, so everything would be alright. Mace, on the other hand, was struggling. He did everything right. He killed the Sith, he evacuated the temple, and he got everyone away from imminent danger. However, he felt like he failed. The galaxy would continue to suffer because he couldn't do it right again. Mace spent the following days on his own, meditating, which was accepted by the various council members. Anakin had his own battles to deal with. He couldn't be on Coruscant with Padme and it drastically affected him. Due to the chaos of the events, he never had a chance to get back to her. And due to the stress of the attack on the temple and the relocation of the Jedi, she went into labor, especially because Mas Amedda bombarded the temple into nothing. She survived the entire ordeal, and she was able to communicate with Anakin, but due to the space anomaly, they could only talk for about 10 minutes or so every 20 hours. He learned that they had twins, and the parents named them Luke and Leia. But aside from that, he was very nervous about everything going on across the galaxy. The Jedi were now constantly in a series of discussions. How could they combat the rise of the war? Realistically, they couldn't do anything. The only thing the Jedi could try and do is claim neutrality and hope that perhaps they could end the war as peacekeepers, but getting involved could prove to be deadly. The Separatists throughout the war have been putting million credit bounties on Jedi, and even higher for more important Jedi, though this was a Dooku-era thing. Most of the CIS didn't use it. As for the Republic, they had a new set of rules. Guard stations across the galaxy were being set up, as per Sidious's post-war plan, and the clones were given orders to shoot the Jedi on sight. Order 66 was initiated army-wide, which didn't exactly help them with anything either. The clones were still killing machines, but without the free will to think and strategize, they became less creative soldiers. Another downer for the Republic was that super tactical droids knew the cure to destroying Republic battleships. Due to Palpatine, the Kuat drive yards were creating the successor to the glorified ship of the line called a Venator. The Venator was great, but it was a carrier. These new Star Destroyers would be ships of the line. However, once they were released, the tactical droids realized that they were especially weak against fighters. Tri-droids were the perfect counter. and they were already a nightmare for clone pilots, especially without Jedi helping in the space arena, so the Republic would meet its match. Because the Jedi weren't able to technically be involved, morale around the temple on Simio was low. The Council worked dedicatedly to solve the issue, but it was really difficult. Masters would begin going out trying to resolve the conflict in any way they could, but even without Dooku and Palpatine, the war continued forward. This was mostly due to Mace Windu. His lust for power corrupted him and pushed him to become more of an aggressive ruler. What he didn't expect was how badly it would backfire. As the Jedi went into CIS and Republic territory to help calm things down, the war got even more heated. Once the Jedi abandoned the war effort, the Republic started to lose. It wasn't directly correlated with the Jedi disappearance, but to the public, it certainly looked like it. Part of it felt like Mace Windu pushed them away so he could seize power, and he was secretly responsible for Palpatine's death. Conspiracy theory, obviously. Within 5 months, the Republic went from closing in on victory to holding their lines while being on their heels. The Jedi and Senators fighting for peace weren't getting anywhere either. The Jedi were able to, in the 5-month period, interact with Separatist diplomats, but they weren't able to make any progress with the peace negotiations. The CIS Council turned more people into investors, and with their money on the war, they would make out like bandits with the Separatist victory. Everything felt extremely hopeless for both sides. On the Republic side of things, senators like Amidala, Chuchi, Organa, and Mothma were doing everything within their power to help ease the tensions, but they were nearly cast out like the Jedi were. It only became more apparent as the Republic started losing its own territory that they maybe should have tried to end the war peacefully earlier. On Simio, Ahsoka rejoined the Order, because they were no longer commanders, but more than ever it felt like the Jedi were ineffective at everything. But in reality, how could 10,000 Jedi stop 2 warring factions, one of which completely cut off contact with them? Mace and Anakin became very close over this time period. The bond created in their respective victories over the Sith rallied them together in a way they could have never predicted. With each other, they were a fierce duo, but without much to fight, they had to propel each other forward, rather than be held down by the choices of the past. It wasn't that the choices were wrong, because things could have been much worse, but it was the fact that they didn't react quick enough, or they didn't stop mass from tearing apart the Republic. Anakin, inversely, was also suffering. He was without his wife and children. He maybe had 20 minutes in a 24-hour period of time where he could actually talk to her. The space anomaly outside the planet continuously moved around it, and because Coruscant was so far away, it was hard to communicate for long periods of time, so they didn't have much time to talk. Because the Jedi couldn't get in contact with Republic senators, they had a hard time helping the cause. But after those 5 months, Anakin's fear of revealing his relationship came to an end. He knew that no matter what, as a Jedi and as a person, he couldn't let this war continue. So he told the Council that he had an in. They were extremely excited to hear, and thanks to Anakin, the Jedi were able to be more productive in doing outreach into the Republic. What followed would be the next 4 months of the bloodiest combat the war saw. New battleships from both sides released, alongside that of new battle droids. The clones were getting slaughtered consistently on the battlefield, but they were holding their own territory. It was just gruesome though. During this period, Jedi communicated with senators on both sides. All of this being done behind CIS and Republic leaders' backs. Separatist senators saw the death toll for citizens and decided it wasn't worth filling their pocketbooks for. The Republic senators had rallied against Mace Windu, but he was able to steal power from the Senate by using executive orders on the clones to make them more loyal to him alone. It was very difficult, especially once Mace made a law that condemned anyone that dare share communications with the Jedi behind his back. But the problem with the people in power was, just as Palpatine said, they feared losing it. Now that the Jedi had no power, they had no fear. All they could do was face the war head on and try and bring it to an end. With a coalition of senators from both sides, they prepared a coup on both the Separatist Council and Mace Windu and his goons. The war had gotten worse. Despite it coming to a standstill in the 9th month of action since the Battle of Coruscant, the Republic and CIS cracked down on their citizens. People protested the war, and therefore there was enough reason for martial law to be enacted across the galaxy on both sides. There was also an added benefit. With nearly a year having gone by, clones were abandoning the army. Their inhibitor chips either wore out or were removed. Now they were returning in squads to help the peacemaking process. On the 3rd day of the 9th month of combat in the 3rd year of the war, the coup began. But no one would know. It'd be silent. Combat would continue on the front lines. Protesters would be suppressed by clones and droids, all the same. It was a collective movement, and the Council made it clear to all the volunteers that their actions, despite being immoral in the way of the Jedi Code, would be forgiven. It was for the greater good of the galaxy, and so their mission was imperative. The volunteers included Mace Windu, Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, Shakti, and Obi-Wan for Coruscant. The squad for Raxus included Deba Balaba, Plo Koon, Kiadi-Mundi, Sindralik, and Baylan Skoll. Both groups left the Samoa system and departed for their respective locations. It was all done quietly, without hesitation, and effectively. The Jedi wiped out the leaders in one fell swoop. Though thanks to clone reinforcements working in tandem with their Jedi generals, they were able to alleviate some of the code breaking that otherwise would have been necessary. But just as the coups were successful, it didn't mean the war automatically just came to an end. It took time. The senators spent months drafting up their plans for a peace treaty. Both sides wanted this war to come to an end, and they didn't want another war to begin after its conclusion. The galactic discussions began, and the Jedi became important pieces in such discussions. Not that they had any control over the outcome, they didn't, but their voices were important. They could shed more light on what happened before Moss took power, and they did. It was because of the Jedi that people were able to learn that they had been duped. The next several years would consist of legislative work devoted to avoiding something like this ever happening again. Anakin, after the coup, wouldn't go straight back to Samoa. He would separate and sneak off, thanks to Captain Rex. He got him to a safe location so that he could travel back home with Padme. So when the Jedi returned to Samoa, he'd have a chance to spend a couple days with Padme and the twins. It was the literal happiest moment of his life. He would cherish every second of the few days he spent behind on Coruscant. As much as the hurt of being separated for 9 months cost him, he would rather that happen than lose her or allow the galaxy to suffer. His time with the twins was capped off by both of them on separate days, taking their first steps in front of him. A moment that he knew he would pride for a lifetime. Though what concerned him was what came next. Despite the Jedi finding home on Samwai, they wouldn't stay there permanently. Due to their time in the Outer Rim, they found that there were worse travesties still happening to the people of the galaxy, so they became involved. They focused on helping those in need, which meant they would move out from their home on Samai. Best buds, Mace and Anakin, devised a plan. They would use Samai as training grounds. It was perfect. Elsewhere, at places like Tempest and Ashes Ree, outposts would be reinstalled, along with new ones galaxy-wide. It was determined that the Jedi would lose their grip on the politics of the galaxy and focus on securing said galaxy. Because of this new directive, Jedi Master Anakin Skywalker had much more leeway to be away from the Council. He could use his status as Master to do whatever he really wanted to do. So he'd be able to balance out his life with the Jedi and the one with his family. It wasn't exactly hidden. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka knew. But it wasn't something he flaunted either. Anakin just always remembered that he would cherish his choices after the Battle of Coruscant. He prided himself on his ability to see the entire perspective, but he knew that he needed to keep learning, and so he did. He trained his children, and even trained another Padawan. Ahsoka would have her own students, and find herself on the Council after Coleman Cash stepped down. The Qui-Gon Jinn lineage lived strong through the Jedi Order, as all of Kenobi's, Ahsoka's, and Skywalker students would be held in high regard in their own respective futures. Thanks to the Jedi, the galaxy would be able to focus on its new dawn, free from the oppression of the Sith, and corruption. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to our patrons: Galvin Gaming, Tristan Mandler, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Bane, Laliand, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewu 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny DeGuin, Seth Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Cali, Gunley 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Fortis Like Star Wars, Airbus, Rex Wolf, the man 3 first names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Luke Denwing. Smash the like button if you want to support me in other ways. Go check out the things down below. Otherwise, let's talk about the story. I thought the concept of Anakin accepting what Mace wanted to do as something that he did earlier in the movie would be interesting to cover. Him just kind of going along with Mace seemed like a good way for the two of them to bond. I do truly believe that the Jedi would have given him the rank of Master had he not betrayed Mace Windu. It kind of just seemed like it was on the way there, and I think Mace seriously just didn't want him there because he was confused. He could sense the disturbance, he could sense the darkness rising, and having him there could lead to exactly what happened. So I thought going this direction would be a really cool way to explore the dynamic between Anakin and Mace, but I still wanted the tragedy of Revenge of the Sith still to feel present, which is why the clones turned on the Jedi and Order 66 still happened, but it just wasn't effective. The effect of it was more so felt for the clones, who had to fight for an extra 9 months and get absolutely demolished. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.